Hello everyone, I am Tobiah Murphy and welcome back to Murphy Music Academy. It is so good to be back with you. My last video, especially the one on shoulder rests, got a lot of positive responses, especially this one from Gabriel Torresin. Though that was not the original intention or point of my video, I will not argue with you, Gabriel. I am quite hypnotic. Yet alas, any of the temptations which I must therefore be inspiring within any of you are not the point of what we are trying to do here today. Alas, today we are here to learn. We are here to pursue noble goals. So, sit down, get your violin out. It's time to practice. And today we are going to start to learn how to properly do bouncing bow techniques. Now, during the past month and a half, I've been a bit of a world traveler, or a United States traveler. Big reason why I haven't been able to make any more of these videos. And I thought, okay, when I get back to this, what am I going to make the next video on? And I settled on bouncing bow techniques because that is something that up until my master's, I actually really struggled with. Even getting into the Cleveland Institute of Music, even playing a lot of really complicated music at a very high level, even, winning the Kansas City Symphony's youth concerto competition, I still could not keep up, something as might be as simple as a consistent Sautille. And now through my time, in my own personal teaching, and then of course, even when I was doing sort of graduate and postgraduate work and watching a lot of the younger students and things they were struggling with, I realized that this is an issue that, well, once you get it, it's actually not that complicated, but getting to that point seems to be a big struggle for a lot of young and often very good and talented violinists. But the thing about something like spiccato or sautille is that you cannot get away with not knowing how to do them. It doesn't matter how good you are at anything else in the violin. If you are unable to accomplish real quality bouncing bow techniques, then you cannot consider yourself to be an accomplished violinist in any way, shape, or form. It's much different than something like, let's say, up bow staccato or down bow staccato, especially, where you can be good in just about anything else in the violin, and if you don't have a really good up bow staccato, then it really doesn't matter. That's more of a, it's a fun move. It's a good thing to know how to do, and I'll probably do a video on that later as well, but it's really not fundamentally important. But if you can't sustain a quality spiccato or sautille, could you imagine playing the Tchaikovsky Concerto, third movement, just, with this détaché stroke? It would sound absolutely terrible. Oh, that felt so wrong. So, not only does not being able to effectively execute bouncing bow techniques limit your expressive capabilities, but it also excludes you from playing certain pieces of music entirely. So, you'd think this would be like a super important thing for everyone to learn and to really instill in their young students at a very early age. You'd think that. It's not what happens. Like I said, I didn't learn how to properly do this until I was done with my degree at the Cleveland Institute of Music. No excuse for that, Billy. No excuse. Then again, no excuse for the other stuff you were doing, but you should have taught me how to do that. Leaving my personal grudges aside, the real question for you is, why aren't you being taught how to do this properly? Now, I'm sure most of you have been flung into the deep end of this at some level, especially, let's say, if you're in the later Suzuki books, there are going to be things, notes with certain dots on them, that your teacher is going to probably have you try to do a bouncing bow technique, usually a form of spiccato. However, unless you are extraordinarily natural at this, chances are your bouncing bow is going to sound incredibly percussive and hollow. Now, often the teacher will come to the student and try to get them to make the spiccato sound a little bit better. Usually, though, by just telling them that it needs to sound a little fuller and kind of giving them a sense of how the bow is supposed to be moving. But it's really a half-baked effort. It doesn't really break down the necessary parts of the technique to learn how to do it truly and properly and consistently. So you might ask yourself, of course, Why are the teachers doing this? What is the problem with these teachers that at least know how to do it themselves, not working to really help the student understand? And there are a couple reasons for that. One reason might be that they have sort of a very, very old school view that you either have it or you don't. You either understand violin playing, at least the higher level things of violin playing, or you don't. And if you don't, I'm sorry, I'm just going to give you whatever it is that I can help you with. But at the end, you're not going to amount to much, so let's just have fun. So that's one reason, and I actually tend to think that that reason, while it probably does exist, is very rare. The main reason that your teacher isn't helping you to the fullest extent with a lot of these techniques is, quite frankly, because they're lazy. Now, I wrote extensively, actually, about this in my very first article on the Murphy Music Academy website. You can go check it out at murphymusicacademy.org/theblog. It's called Why Teachers Fail. I'll put a link in the description below. Teaching violin, especially when you're trying to get all of your students up to a very high level, is really, really difficult and really, really complicated and takes a lot of emotional and mental energy. Because you're not just working on the current problems that the student is having or new things that they need to learn. You are in a constant process of guiding their metamorphosis. Sometimes you have to fix things that are issues right now, but you also have to look down the line and see, okay, that thing is not really causing a problem right now, but I have to start preparing, because if I don't watch over that thing that they're doing right now that's kind of wrong but isn't a huge deal and I need to deal with this immediate thing right now, if I don't find a way to deal with that little thing over there, it's going to become a big problem in the future. Then you also have to find ways to sort of incrementally sort of build their technique so that they don't have these, massive hard jumps into certain things, and that they don't feel like they're suddenly, the student doesn't feel like they're pressed for time to really, really learn things. And so they have this great establishment of all their technique and this great base. That takes a lot of thought, a lot of effort. You spend time outside of the lesson thinking about, what can I do to get the student? The student isn't getting this thing. How do I make this work? All of that. It takes a toll on you emotionally. It takes a toll on you physically. It takes a toll on you mentally. It's a great challenge, and I love it. It's my favorite thing to do besides just playing myself. But I understand why some people, and I've been tempted myself, I understand why people are just like, you know what, screw it. Here's your exercises, here's your stuff, play, okay, that was out of tune, that rhythm was wrong, do it again, and then go home, come back the next week, give me my money, and we're good. I don't see you again after you graduate high school. But you're an artist. Too bad. That's your load to bear. You decided to go into music. This is your responsibility. You decided you want to take up teaching. This is your responsibility. Now, come on. Let's teach our students and teach them correctly. Now that you know why you weren't being taught correctly, let's now jump into sort of the basic movements you need to have mastered for you to be able to do spiccato correctly. We'll get into Sautille later. It's a slightly different thing. Firstly, there are two aspects of your just basic bowing that you need to have mastered before you can start to end up doing spiccato correctly. The first thing is to make sure that you have completely mastered being able to do nice, short, straight strokes coming from your elbow, and that you don't have any wobbling going on at all here. The reason for this is the reason that, sort of your early spiccato attempts sounded very hollow and percussive is because you're taking the bouncing aspect of bouncing bow technique a little too seriously. So you're doing sort of that, whatever it's called in the Mahler 4. There's one section where in German it's like, I forget, something bewegen or whatever. You're actually supposed to play by hitting the bow with your string. That's essentially what most people end up starting to do. But the fact of the matter is we vibrate the strings by friction of moving the bow across the strings, and it's no different in doing spiccato. So you need to make sure you have this nice straight motion that you get entirely from your elbow. So obviously you start out with, a typical long bow, which you should be able to do. Sorry, a little bit of room on this table here. But also you're going to be able to need to do sort of nice short strokes close to the balance point, because almost all bouncing strokes need to happen at the balance point. Most people don't like to get to play close to the frog because they think it's uncomfortable. get used to it, or you're not going to learn how to do this correctly. So for starters, take whatever spiccato passage that you're working on, and we're going to lift the bow a little bit in between each stroke, but we're also going to place the bow coming from the air, so a short stop, stop, then place, and keep it all under the balance point, by the way. So move from the elbow, place again, just move like that. So let me take the section that I did earlier from Suzuki Book 6 of the La Folia. So we're going to... and have a very militaristic sense of how you're moving your arm. Don't make sure you're not using anything else. So we're just going to go... and do that for just practice that for in that section for about a week or so. You don't have to, these techniques, you don't have to feel like you need to learn them overnight. You actually probably end up learning them quicker if you take the time to progress through them at an even pace. Now, as you get used to sort of this stopping, lifting, and starting again thing just right around here, using the energy from your elbow, you can start to go a little bit faster, but still feel, even as you lift the bow off the string just a little bit, and don't go too high, but as you lift the string off a little bit in between each one of these strokes, that still the energy is still like a normal bow stroke. You're pulling the bow across the string, you're just getting a little bit shorter, and you're shortening the space in between the strokes. So I'll just take one note, D on the A string, so... that is the type of thing that is going to get the spiccato to ring, because it's still a very short stroke, and it's still a stroke that eventually, especially as you get faster, is coming from the air. So it's going to have that sense of the initial percussiveness, not the sort of broad, hollow percussiveness that we talked about earlier, but there is going to be a percussive aspect to it, but it's also going to have the resonance that you desperately want to have in a good spiccato stroke. So once you've practiced, let's say, your section and La Folia or whatever, just getting used to this motion, then you can practice just a little bit. Maybe you just even want to try one note of just shortening that, like I just did. So, starting here. I'm stopping to grab the string every time. Still focusing on rubbing the string across instead of hitting it downwards. Still focusing on stopping and starting from here. Until eventually there becomes this sort of lilt to the separation between the notes. So it's instead of more of this, it's like this. But start out doing that slowly and just get used to doing this rhythm. The next video I'm going to actually talk about sort of the sense of the bouncing, because there is still a sense in which you feel the bow bouncing against the string. But first, just start doing this. And don't go any faster than this by the end of this. You should practice that for maybe a week or two and just get it up to that point where you have complete control over the dropping, the stopping of the string, and the bow stroke coming from the elbow. Now, the other thing that you need to learn how to do before we start really getting into doing full-on spiccato is a technique that you may or may not have been introduced to. Certain teachers are very, very good about making sure their students learn to do this. Others, unfortunately, neglect it. And it's this weird technique that is not something you actually ever use by itself, but it is something that affects just about every other bow technique that we have, and that is colle. Now, the funny thing about colle is that if you know what that is, that means you've probably learned how to do it. If you don't, well, then pay attention because I'm about to teach you. Colle is a bow stroke done basically entirely at the frog, where you practice moving the bow entirely with the wrist and fingers in sort of this motion. So starting at the frog, we're going to actually start with an up bow. So we're going to need to be a few inches above the frog, but not very much. So we'll start about here with the up bow. I'll turn so you can see. At the up bow, I'm going to be on open A string. Just do this with open strings, and that's it. It's a kind of a quick bite to the string. That's sort of what colle teaches you. Teach you how to use the fingers to catch the string. And you can use this just about any part of the bow, but we start here. So, and then place the bow at the frog, and then the opposite direction to do the down bow. Actually, don't do that last one. This is meant to be a slow and methodic exercise. So, a couple of the things that you will probably run into if you've never done Cole, which is you're going to have some trouble figuring out how to bite the string. Again, remember, all bow strokes come with rubbing the bow hair across the string, not from any type of percussive stroke. So what you want to start out with, instead of just that normal bite from the Cole, is to practice actually doing sort of smooth strokes, but just using your wrist and mostly your fingers. Now, again, also make sure that you're not incorporating any other part of your arm. Make sure, of course, never incorporating your shoulder here and your upper arm, but also make sure you're not incorporating your forearm and the movement from your elbow. This is purely to teach your fingers and your wrist how to be involved in sort of making contact with the string and biting and connecting with the string. So you can start out slowly like this. And you kind of want to feel like you're pushing the hand to keep the bow hair in the string. You're kind of pushing the hand away. So the hand is weighty and it wants to stick to the string, but you're kind of, for me, you're like pushing it off. Not, the bow doesn't come off the string, but your hand's heavy and your fingers are like, get off of me, like that. And then for me, just practice doing this. Obviously, it doesn't sound good, but that's usually where you have to start. So just start by doing this nice, smooth stroke only with your fingers and wrist. From there, you can try now that you've got the movement basically there, now you can try to sort of catch the string. So a little bit of a bite on the string and then a very quick movement, either this way or this way. So you can start here, that you were doing this. Now catch the string and really go for it. Also, for any teachers out there that want to be teaching or introducing Cole to their students, I highly recommend you actually use Variation B in Suzuki Book 1 to teach your younger students Cole. It's obviously something they'll know. It's very, very easy for everything else. And it's a good spot, and it sounds actually pretty good when you play it that way. So you go... Just a thought. Anyway, that is it for this primer on, is it primer or primer? Anyway, doesn't matter. That is it for this introduction into the basic techniques that you have to develop a good quality spiccato. Now, next time I'm going to show you how to combine both of those aspects together, both the wrist and finger movement and this very strict straight up and down energy from the elbow movement. Combine that with sort of using the bounciness of both the hair and the string to create a really, really great spiccato stroke. But trust me, you have to have these two things down first before you can start combining them into what becomes a very great spiccato stroke. Anyway, I've been Tobias Murphy. This has been Murphy Music Academy. Thank you so much for sticking around for this very long video. I'll try to make the other ones a little bit shorter, though I always say that. Anyway, always remember, as you're practicing, as you're mastering these basic techniques that will help you in just about every other bow stroke, but especially spiccato, that there is no pleasure in mediocrity. Have a great day.